All of us are suffering from the GATC syndrome, which is happiness seems to be just around the corner. Our happiness is pegged on a future achievement. And it's not as if you'll achieve it. Even if you achieve it, it's not as if you'll be happy because your happiness then shifts to one more thing in the future.
Give me one practice that I can start right today with to practice the Vedantic way of living life.
Study the Bhagavad Gita. And what the Gita says is just perform action. Focus on the action. Don't think about the outcome for the simple reason that the outcome is not in your hands. Manu Bhakar referred to yesterday when she won the bronze medal. When she was asked what was going through your mind, she said, I read the Bhagavad Gita a lot. And what the Gita says is just perform action. Hanuman was a monkey. The monkey is Chanchala and Asthira. That mind, Hanuman, became single-pointed when he saw Lord Ram. And that gave him the power. There are 3 states of consciousness: waking, dream, deep sleep, that we all go through. All 3 are conditioned. But your real state, your real identity is the 4th.
Welcome to the Journey Within podcast with me, Shobha Rana. I'm an emotional intelligence and mindset coach and also the host and the creator of this podcast. The Journey Within podcast, as the name suggests, is all about helping you, our viewers, take the journey within. But why is this journey important? It is very important for you to connect with your own self, your own inner world, to know where you stand in your life today, to have a deeper understanding of your today. Where is your joy, happiness, or misery, or problems are coming from? Once you have an understanding of this, then only you can reach where you want to reach in your life, the goals that you have for yourself in your life. So this podcast is dedicated to developing a profound understanding of who you are today and where your potential can take you tomorrow. Today I have with me Jaya Rao ma'am, who is the world's most influential spiritual teacher of the Indian philosophy, Vedanta. Her research and studies of over 40 years has touched the lives of millions across the globe. And today, we shall be doing the journey within, understands ourselves better through the lens of Vedanta. Now, the natural question is, what is the relevance of Vedanta, a text that is thousands of years old, in the modern lives of today? Well, that and more we'll be decoding in this episode. In this episode, we have tried to lay a strong foundation of Vedanta for all of you. What is Vedanta? What are the core principles that govern Vedanta? Why is it even important for us to know of Vedanta? How does it help me in my life today? The modern day challenges of stress, mental health, anxiety, fear, greed, lust, all these emotions. How do we navigate our way through these emotions that completely trap us using the wisdom of Vedanta? We've also talked about Bhagavad Gita. We've talked about learnings from Katha Upanishads and many more inspiring life lessons you'll get from this episode. So do watch it till the end. Namaste, Jayaji.
Namaste.
Such a pleasure to meet you here. I was looking forward to have this conversation with you for almost a year, and finally here we are. Your wisdom has touched the lives of millions of peoples across nations. You simplify Vedanta in such a beautiful form that it becomes more accessible to us. I want to start exactly there because at this podcast, The Journey Within, what we try to do is try to very clearly give a distinction between the outer world that we are all kind of drawn to and are more focused towards and understand the world as, versus the inner world where the processing of how this life feels to us, how we think about this life happens. So today we want to approach it from the lens of Vedanta, and that is where your wisdom comes in. Please help me understand Vedanta and its core principles.
Yes. To begin with, Vedanta, the word, comes from 2 words, Veda and Anta. So there are 4 Vedas. the most ancient source of knowledge known to humanity. Each of these consists of 4 sections, and the philosophy appears in the last section in the form of the Upanishads, which is why it is called the Anta, last portion of the Vedas. But it is also the end of knowledge. Veda means knowledge. So it's the highest knowledge. Now, why Vedanta in modern life? Let's examine life. Life consists of a series of experiences. An experience comes from 2 aspects. You, the experiencer, and the object, the world, the experienced. So if you want to improve your life, you need to improve your experiences, which means you have to address both the components of the experience, you as well as the world. Now what has happened is that the world has been improved beyond recognition. It's a wonderful world that we live in. But you, the individual, has been neglected. So it's like having a stomach upset and being taken to the most exquisite buffet lunch. You know? There is nothing wrong with the food that is offered, but you can't eat. The very sight of the food nauseates you because there's something wrong with you. So is it in life. You know, we have a wonderful world before us, but we lack the appetite for life. Ask anyone, how is life with you? They'll say, boring, stressful, it's full of anxiety, depression. With a mindset like this, even the best of things around you cannot be enjoyed because you don't have the appetite for life. So what Vedanta primarily does is gives you this tremendous appetite for life where you can enjoy everything that the world has to offer without the stress and the anxiety that usually accompanies us.
You know, that is why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because Vedanta appears to be a tool. You know, it appears to be this tremendous power that if I have a knowledge about it, or if I know my way around it, I can probably navigate through all these problems in my life today. Like you address stresses there, depression, anxiety, panic, fear, greed, lust, all of these emotions are kind of taking a very deep seat in our life. And our decisions, our choices are emerging out of these emotions and the cacophony of these emotions. So help me understand how we can simplify Vedanta or take the learnings from Vedanta to solve these problems. Let's start with fear, because I feel fear is the base emotions of a lot of problems in our life. I feel paralyzed to take a decision because I have a fear that what if it does not go right? I'm stressed out because I have the fear, what if tomorrow my boss says this or my presentation doesn't go well? I have anxiety about my tomorrow, that what if. This what if is one of the major problems that youth and even everybody encounters in their life. Help me decode it through the wisdom of Vedanta.
Yes. See, it all starts with a lack of self-sufficiency, a feeling of insecurity where you feel threatened by the world. And you are dependent on the world for so many things. So what Vedanta does is it helps us in 2 ways. So the law is that spiritual development is inversely proportional to our dependence on the world. So let's say you're at 25% development. You're dependent on the world to the extent of 75% to just be comfortable in life. So you need a lot from the world. The world needs to provide you with a lot to just be comfortable. Now, because you're dependent, there is the fear that what if I don't get? So Vedanta helps you to evolve spiritually, which simply means that you gain the power within to be independent of the world. And then, whether the world provides it or not, you're fine. If the world gives you a lot, you're happy. If the world doesn't give you, you fall back on your own strength. So then you become free from fear.
So basically, you're fulfilled from within.
Exactly.
There is something which is nurturing you from within.
And you're not dependent on anything from the world. So that gives you that power. And you're no longer fearful.
What is that something that lies within us? What is that unhidden potential that we are not tapping into, or we are just absolutely unaware of?
See, basically, we all consist of 2 elements, spirit and matter. Matter is our body, physical entity, the mind, the realm of emotions, the intellect, the domain of discrimination and judgment. Body, mind, and intellect are matter. World is matter. So the world will affect body, mind, and intellect that you can't prevent. Even a prophet, a man of realization, his body, mind, intellect will be affected by the world. But the point that Vedanta is making is you are not body, mind, intellect. You are spirit. So we have wrongly identified with body, mind, intellect and therefore get traumatized by the world. So the message of the Bhagavad Gita is enjoy the world. Enjoy your physical interactions with the world, emotional relationships, intellectual or preoccupations with the world. Enjoy them. But never forget that you are not body, mind, intellect. You are spirit. So when the world affects the body, mind, or intellect, you remain untouched. It's like this. When you take a horseshoe magnet and bring a piece of iron to it, it will get affected because that's the nature of the iron. Take away the iron piece, bring a wooden piece. The magnet doesn't have the power to influence wood. Now do something interesting. Tie the iron and wooden pieces together. Bring the combination to the magnet. It will get affected by the magnet. But even as it gets affected, the wooden piece in it is still untouched, immaculate. So the wooden piece is like our real identity, the spirit. The more you identify with the spirit, the less you will get affected by the world.
So the lives that we are leading are largely into the matter space of the things, right?
Absolutely.
We are associating with the world, we are associating with the mind, the body, and our whole gross identity in this world.
Yes.
This subtler identity that you're talking about, the self or the spirit, what is it? Help me decode that. And also I have one more question here, that does Vedanta negates the existence or the interaction with the matter? Is it teaching you to evolve yourself through a concept which is not rooted in your own physical experience?
No, that's not true. It only helps you to understand your body, understand the mind, understand the intellect, enjoy them and their interactions with the world without getting affected. So be objective. Now what happens is, if you, for instance, eat food and there is an obsession for the food, there is a craving for the food, you don't enjoy the food. Examine it. Who enjoys food? A person who is really not dependent on the food, but has the capacity to enjoy, has the discernment, can discern good food from bad food, and does not need to eat the food in large quantities. A glutton never enjoys. If you see a wine taster, it just barely tastes it. It doesn't drink liters of it. A tea taster just tastes it. So, Vedanta helps you to cultivate that subtlety of sense enjoyment. Even sense enjoyment is subtle. You have a little bit and you have the inner discernment. You see, you can enjoy anything in life only when the mind is calm. So Vedanta teaches you to calm the mind, to be free from desire, greed, and all of these. And then whatever there is, you enjoy 100%.
So you are immersed into the matter and the experience that matter provides you, but you're not kind of attached to it.
Exactly.
So the spirit that you're talking about, is it the soul that the world commonly understands as?
Yes, you can call it what you like. Some people call it spirit. In Sanskrit, it's called Atman. In various soul.
Yeah.
So you can call it what you like. It cannot be conditioned by a name. But it's your mind, whatever you want to associate it with. But all you have to understand it is separate from the body, mind, intellect.
Okay.
It enables the body, mind, and intellect to function, but itself has nothing to do with the functioning of the body, mind, intellect. It's like electricity in all electrical gadgets.
So what is it?
electrical gadget is functions because electricity passes through it. So electricity is the most important component of that gadget. Minus electricity, the most expensive gadget becomes junk immediately.
But like we can see the wire, we can see the cabling, etc., but we cannot see the electricity that is passing through. So soul is something like that. You can't see it. It's not tangible in that manner, but it's like a deep force that is
Yes.
emerging from within.
So it is often compared to butter in milk. Can you see butter in milk? You can't. But you know there is butter in the milk, and there is a technique for extracting that butter from the milk, which is very similar to extracting spirit from your body.
I'm so glad that you brought out that example, because that is something that everybody can understand. Like it's easier to perceive it as it is. Otherwise, the logical mind always questions that you're just saying something. It is just something which is not in my experience. Then how do I even acknowledge its existence? Let alone mastering it, let alone deepening my understanding of it and all of that. But how do I even acknowledge that it is something which is a real thing? It is not like just some concept that a few intellectuals sat together, few wise people sat together and developed the term, and now we are trying to harbor the meaning of life onto that term because the matter is not giving as much meaning.
Yes, see, in the Kenopanishad, and Upanishads are very subtle, the student, ardent student, goes to the guru and says, where is God? What is God? The guru's answer is fantastic. He doesn't use a single word that even a child can't understand, and yet conveys the concept of spirit or God beautifully. So the answer is Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Mano Yat Vacho Havacham Pranasya Pranaha Chakshushash Chakshu. And he goes on. So in short, he says it is the ear of the ear. Shrotrasya Shrotram. Let's just stop with that. When you go to even the most brilliant ENT surgeon and ask him, what makes me hear? Is it the outer ear? No. Then you go inside and say, is it the middle ear, the inner ear? And he takes you step by step to the most subtle concept in your brain maybe, and says, beyond this, I don't know what makes you hear. That I don't know is God, is spirit.
So acknowledging that you don't know, Jayaji,
No, it's not just that you don't know, it is that it cannot be known.
it cannot be known. That is so
You
profound.
can't see your God. You can't feel with your emotions. You can't conceive with your intellect. You can only become God. It's like a dreamer can't understand the waker. A dreamer can't touch the waker. The dreamer can only become the waker. Which is why when Buddha was asked by somebody, who are you? He didn't say, I am an enlightened soul and so on and so forth. He simply said, I am awake. That is how he got the name Buddha. Buddha means awake.
Awake.
What a profound statement. I am awake means the rest of us are in deep slumber. So even the Kathopanishad says, Uttishta, get up. Jagrata, wake up. Until you get there, don't rest content. So there are 3 states of consciousness: waking, dream, deep sleep, that we all go through. All 3 are conditioned. But your real state, your real identity is the 4th plane of consciousness, which is what Buddha referred to as I am awake.
Wow. So
Which is what all the Upanishads point to, the Gita points. That is the spirit.
there's a lot of logical questioning about how do I become awake? How do I wake up from this slumber? There's a lot of space between becoming and being. We are all in a constant chase of becoming something. In the outer world, the matter world, where we are wanting to become more successful, have a more enriched identity, become more famous, and whatever our parameters are. And there is another state which is being, that you are being successful, that you are being, fulfilled. So help me understand the difference between the becoming and the being, and how can everybody who is in the race to become something can just be and find it in their being?
See, it's a question of objectivity. which is a function of the intellect. So when you have a strong intellect, or let's put it this way, when the suspicion gets to you that maybe what I'm experiencing now is a dream. Now, suppose this were a dream. Would you have anxiety about the outcome of this interaction? Would anybody have anxiety about what they're doing or stress? So they'd be completely free from this. And this is what Manu Bhaker referred to yesterday when she won the bronze medal. When she was asked what was going through your mind, she said, I read the Bhagavad Gita a lot. And what the Gita says is just perform action. Focus on the action. Don't think about the outcome for the simple reason that the outcome is not in your hands. And that leads to objectivity. So you do what you have to do objectively, dispassionately. So it's a wonderful concept, which is dispassionate passion.
Yeah, it's sounding
There
almost
is
like
one aspect of you which is passionate because you're dedicated to it, and another aspect which is dispassionate, where when you identify with the spirit to understand it doesn't matter. You do everything as if your life depends on it, knowing fully well it just doesn't matter.
wow. That is the kind of oxymoron that we are constantly living in, and that we have to become more aware of. You're talking from the Vedantic wisdom, you have quoted the Katha Upanishad a couple of times. You've talking about the intellect also. Now, one thing that I'm observing is that, and that is also the mistake that I made, and that is probably how the world operates. That's why we all end up making that mistake, is sharpening one dimension of our intellect, which is intelligence. Because intelligence is rewarded, your parents are happy that you're an intelligent kid, you're scoring good marks. People, your peers are, they recognize you as a superior person if your intelligence is more than them and all of that. So we are sharpening constantly this one dimension of intellect, which is intelligence, but the subtler dimension of intellect that you're talking about. Help me, shed some light on that so that we can understand the subtler dimensions more deeply.
Yes. See, we are human beings. What makes us stand apart from all other living beings is the intellect. And with the intellect, we have been able to progress to the extent we have, even in the external world. Now, why is this important? Because as humans, we are also gifted with another outstanding gift, and that is choice of action. To be vegetarian or non-vegetarian is a choice only we have. No other creature has it. And so many choices. Now, to make the right choice, you need the intellect because life is confusing. That which gives instant pleasure gives you sorrow in the end. And that which is painful in the beginning gives you everlasting happiness. So if you don't know this, and if you're not using your intellect, then you end up making wrong choices. Think of one wrong choice you made in life. What drove it? The whims and fancies of the mind. You liked it, so you did it. Think of one right choice you made. What drove it? The wisdom of the intellect. So it's very, very important to use that intellect. In the world, while interacting with people, see, you spoke of intelligence. Yes, there could be an academic topper, but does he know how to control his sensual urges? Does he know how to handle jealousy, how to handle greed within him and outside of him? Does he know how to handle people? Some are good, some are not so good. So if you lack this ability, you cannot be a success in the world. You can be an academic topper, but you will not be a success. Happiness. Happiness is not something that is a gift that you get. It's something that you need to work towards. And for that also, you need the intellect. First of all, to find out where happiness lies. See, you have a desire. The desire is fulfilled. You're happy. You believe the happiness is in the object. But the truth is, the desire, as long as you have a desire, the mind is agitated. The moment the desire is fulfilled, the agitation of the mind calms down. You're happy, temporarily. But again, some other desire. So actually, where does happiness lie? Not in the object, in your mind. When your mind is agitated, you're unhappy. When the mind is calm, you're happy. So you have to take a right about turn and look within and say, where do I look for happiness? How do I find happiness? All of this you need to use the intellect. And the intellect consists of two kinds. One is called Tikshna Buddhi or gross intellect, which operates in the world between pairs of opposites like profit and loss, day and night, so on and so forth. The second, which is denied to all creatures, is Sukshma Buddhi or subtle intellect, which is like the mariner's compass. It always points north, towards the spirit. So there's something in us which tells us right from wrong. And you don't need a scripture to understand. The scripture only helps to sharpen that. So, if you use both, you will be a success in the world and you will be successful at spiritual growth.
Help me with 3 exercises that can help develop the intellect.
Yes, primarily, children should be encouraged to develop curiosity, to ask questions. Many of these questions you may not have the answers to, but at least you are asking the question.
Or they are stupid questions is what they say.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
The question is stupid.
Yeah, that's what.
But as long as you keep questioning, your intellect is getting exercised. And like a simple thing, like you get into an elevator and the elevator goes up. Ask the question, how does the elevator go up? Because all other objects come down by the law of gravity. How does a plane fly? You may not know the answer, but at least you're questioning. Now, this questioning is inquiring, is positively discouraged in the modern world. And then I can't think of a better source of intellectual development than the Bhagavad Gita. Manu Bhaker said it openly. Julia Roberts says it openly. There are so many Americans that have said it openly. That there was one person, the name eludes me. He said in the 80s he was looking for a translation of the Bhagavad Gita. So he looked at many Indians who excelled in the United States. And when he asked them, they all said, the source of my excellence is the Bhagavad Gita. So he said, why not go directly to it?
Yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs.
No, somebody else.
Somebody else.
But yes, Steve Jobs also came to India. And when he found it, he read it non-stop all night. He couldn't put the book down. Because it opens up a whole lot of things. It's not just the intellect. Intellect is the starting point. Then it speaks of how you can use your body, your actions to achieve excellence. How you can use your emotions and purify them to get to the highest level. How you can, like for instance, Hanuman. Hanuman represents the mind. Hanuman was a monkey. The monkey is Chanchala and Asthira. Asthira is constantly going from one place to another, and Chanchala, even at one spot, it's restless. That mind, Hanuman, became single-pointed when he saw Lord Ram. And that gave him the power. So the mind, when it is distracted, deranged, it loses power. The same mind when it becomes focused. So you need to have a higher ideal. Something that excites you, something that inspires you, something that just takes you out of yourself to hold your attention, to make you single-pointed. And then all the hard work that you put in becomes a joy. It doesn't become drudgery.
What is this something that you're referring to?
A higher goal. So a person who has a talent in music says, music is my God, and I need to get to the highest level of music. An athlete that won the Olympics in the 1930s, he was from Scotland. He was called the Flying Scotsman. He didn't have the money to hire a coach or to get expensive methods of fine-tuning his skills. His philosophy was very simple. God made me to run, and I will run for God. And that made him achieve the impossible. In one race, he fell down in the middle of the race picked himself up, continued running. He still won the race. Before another race, his shoes were broken down. So he didn't have the money to buy a new pair. He went to the trash can and picked up two dissimilar shoes. He wore those dissimilar shoes, ran in the Olympics, and still won. So, how do you achieve the impossible? Not by muscular training, but just by purifying your mind and focusing the mind. So, when you think of nothing else than what you are pursuing and you find God in that, that becomes excellence. So, that is through action.
Yeah.
Through devotion is Hanuman. And the most wonderful thing is, not only do people worship Lord Ram, of course, but people worship Hanuman. People chant the Hanuman Chalisa. So, what gave Hanuman power can give you and me that power, provided we have that unconditional love. For what? Not just God, for all beings. Remove hatred from your heart. That's what the Gita says. Krishna's message to Arjuna is, kill them if necessary, but with love. And he's exaggerated it to a point where it seems almost impossible.
So a mother-like love for everyone.
Yes. So what it means is, you must have love in your heart for everyone, but your conduct is determined by the behavior of the other person.
Jayaji, there is so much weight on finding the purpose, finding the soul's journey, etc., that we are very confused. People are left very confused that what is this purpose? Then there will be, coaches and gurus, etc., coming in and telling you a charted way to find your purpose. I mean, it's all this noise. What exactly is the purpose? Let's understand from the Vedantic point of view, because that's the ancient wisdom.
Let's understand from our point. What is the purpose of every living being, not just human being? It's happiness, isn't it? Whatever you do or don't do in life, it is because you believe you'll become happier. You're chasing happiness. So, Vedanta just helps you to achieve that happiness.
As who you are right here, right now.
Yes.
Because
one of the most important things that Swami Ramatirtha said, which inspired me when I was very young and actually changed my life, changed the direction of my life, is the statement, if you're not happy as you are, where you are, you will never be happy.
that is so profound.
All of us are suffering from the JATC syndrome, which is happiness seems to be just around the corner. Ask anyone, are you happy?
Just next goal. Just
Yes,
the
I'm
next
happy.
thing.
If only my daughter got married, I'd be
If only now I have a grandchild. If only now that happens. So this if only it's a non-ending cycle or the circle of life.
So, our happiness is pegged on a future achievement. And it's not as if you'll achieve it. Even if you achieve it, it's not as if you'll be happy, because your happiness then shifts to one more thing in the future. So, you must understand that your condition of the mind, of your happiness or unhappiness at the present moment is the truth. So, if you're not happy, you have to do something about your mind, not things around.
Jayaji, people say that the ones who have material wealth and possessions and success in their life, spirituality is only for those people. Spirituality is for privileged. It's not a priority. But this discussion with you and the many that I've had on this podcast have led me to believe that spirituality should be our priority, irrespective of where we fall on the Maslow's hierarchy. Even if our basic needs we are struggling for every day, then also there needs to be an element of spirituality or some connection with this deeper self that needs to happen. But when we are on this low rank, when we are struggling for basic needs to be met, then we are not kind of focusing on this deeper dimension. Can you help those people understand the importance and the relevance of understanding spirituality?
See, yes, it is true that you can't talk philosophy to a starving person. So there is a certain basic standard of living that we need to arrive at before we think of higher things. Because otherwise you'll be obsessed with just that I don't have enough food. But assuming you've got there, it is the inner state of your mind that will aspire for spiritual things. And that thirst is something that you can't give people. They have to have it. You can only present. It's like in Plato's metaphor. He speaks of generations of people living in a cave. And one young man gets up and says, there has to be something beyond this cave. The whole world can't be just this. This is called mumukshatva, the desire for liberation, which is inherent in each one of us, but it's clouded by many other desires. So the other people in the tribe, elders, say there is nothing, so go to sleep. So he obeys for a while, but this thought is constantly haunting him. So one day when everyone is asleep, he ventures out alone. And he turns a few corners and gets to a horrible state where he's in blinding darkness. He's lost sight of the fire in the cave and he hasn't yet come to the mouth of the cave. But just the conviction that there has to be something beyond the cave keeps him going. And very soon, he sees a diamond sparkling in the distance. That is the mouth of the cave. Now he knows he's always been right, so he pursues it with great enthusiasm, comes out into the open, and sees something, experiences something that he's never experienced before. Sunlight. He breathes an ethereal air. So on and so forth. He enjoys it fully for a week and then thinks of the people in the cave. Goes back into the cave and speaks to them. The sun, moon, stars, flowers, birds, brooks, rivers, free air. The more he speaks, the more they're convinced that there's something wrong with him. He's mad. So he gives up and he says, I've done my bit. And he's about to leave when another youngster comes, taps him on the shoulder and says, come on, let's go. I'm with you. This is the Guru Shishya Parampara. Now, the point is that thirst has to be within you. If you don't have it, you will not have it at a lower middle class level. You will not have it as a billionaire. If you have it, irrespective of your external circumstances, you will pursue it. But it is true that when you go through negative experiences, sorrow, that is like a prod to make you look inward. So, the Gita speaks, Krishna speaks of 4 kinds of spiritual people. One are artharthi, who go to a temple and say, I will put X amount in the undi, provided God gives me 100X back. So you go only for spiritual prosperity. Many people do that. Second category, artha. The majority of people belong to this, distressed. Somebody loses a family member, somebody meets with financial loss. Then they turn towards the spiritual. Third is jignasu, intellectual curiosity. Just is like academic brilliance. The last is the jnani, the true seeker. That is very rare. But if you have it, consider yourself lucky and pursue. You will get to the end. Like that man in the cave got into the open. What a difference in life.
And he made a difference in someone else's life, the younger kid who came in and said, I want to go out with you. That is something that we're trying to do with this podcast, spark these conversations which at least lead you to that curiosity. At least you're able to define your problem clearly. I think problem well defined is half solution found anyway, right? If you're able to define and precipitate it, distill it for yourself, then you are that much more closer to the solution. That is what we're trying to do through this conversation. And I hope the viewers are able to dig out the learnings. You've shared so much about so many practical, pragmatic applications of Vedanta. As much as you have spoken about something from the scriptures or something from Upanishads, etc. But you have also laid down it in a very, very simple language for us to apply it in our everyday life. Jayarji, what is that one profound teaching of Vedanta that everyone must know?
That There is excellence within each one of us. Nobody is denied that excellence. It is there all the time. You just have to have the conviction that yes, I have it, and find it. And the method to that is spelled out so clearly in Vedanta, in the Bhagavad Gita. Study it. And I'm again and again coming back to Manu Bhakan because it's relevant. It's happened just the other day. That is the pathway to excellence. You know, if there is a movie called The Legend of Bagavans, where there is a golfer who is a brilliant golfer in the 1930s, but because of a personal problem gives up golf and takes to drink. And then there is a competition announced, so his people get him to participate. He's practicing his shots, but he's drinking so hard he can barely see the ball. And a man comes out of the wilderness, darkness, and offers to be his caddy. So that caddy is the guru. His name is Bagavans. This is not a Bollywood movie. This is a mainstream Hollywood movie made by Robert Redford. So his name is Bagavans. Does it ring a bell? Bhagavan. He's the guru. And the golfer's name is Ranulph Jr. He's called Arjuna for short. Arjuna. And I'm not imagining it. Robert Redford says it. So it starts. And then at one hole, he is confused. So he asks the caddy, which club do I play with? The caddy is so annoyed with him because he's playing badly. He says, pick any. You're playing so badly, it doesn't make a difference. But he calls him back and says something that every single human being should remember all their lives. And that is, there's a perfect shot waiting out there. All you got to do is get yourself out of the way. This is the gospel truth. This is the central theme of the Bhagavad Gita. There is perfection within each one of us. All you have to do is get yourself out of the way. Your selfishness, your foolishness, your stupidity, your ego. Once that is out of the way, perfection which is already within you flows. So you are stopping that.
So you are standing between your own way, like you and the success, and you are there in between as an obstacle.
Yes. So any time you think of yourself, you fall short. You become mediocre. Even in the slightest way. Even if it is genuinely unselfish. But you're still thinking of yourself.
So you have to not think of the self.
How not to think of yourself? Think of something higher. That is the concept of yajna in the 3rd chapter of the Gita. He says, this world is not for the non-sacrificer. Yajna means sacrifice. So he says, when the human being was created, the Creator gave him the gift of sacrifice, which no other creature can consciously sacrifice. Only the human being can. And then he says something very interesting. With this, may you prosper. Which means without it is impossible to prosper. And all of us are trying to prosper without it. Without this element of sacrifice. And then he says, may this be the Kamadhenu of all your endeavors. Kamadhenu is a mythological cow that fulfills all your desires. You don't have to go looking for Kamadhenu. He says, sacrifice is Kamadhenu. It's so true. Look at people who have sacrificed for their field. Madame Curie was totally dedicated to her research. She got 2 Nobel Prizes. Einstein, he didn't work for the Nobel Prize. He just got it. He was dedicated to physics. Swami Haridas sang for God in Iceland. There was no audience. He just sang to the deity in a temple. Even today, there is a Swami Haridas Sammelan. This Eric Liddell that I spoke of, he was just an athlete. He could have gone into anonymity. But he excelled because he said, I will work for God. He got thought of self out of the way. So, whether it is Arjuna, who was asked, what do you see? All other students said, I see trees, leaves, everything. This Arjuna said, I only see the eye of the fish. And boy, did he get it. So that is what we should carry with us, that there is perfection within me and I cannot die without getting.
I really hope that this one profound teaching that you have shared, that there is perfection within me. I am perfect the way I am. This reaches out to people, especially the youngsters who are constantly believing more and more in their imperfections and kind of trying to find a way to live with their, not even live with their, in fact, negate the existence of their imperfections. There's so much comparison that is drawn these days. You're constantly, comparing yourself to other people. What are they achieving? How is their life looking better than yours? And all of this comparison is giving the rise to so much of thought of self. You're all the time thinking about yourself. Like you're saying that we have to rise above the thought of the self. But our whole life, by its very design, from the very childhood, is only about you focusing on yourself. Thought of just the self is taking the center stage. I mean, it's only logical. It's no wonder that so many mental health related problems, emotional well-being related problems are becoming more and more prevalent.
But it's not just thought of self. Thought of self can be body, mind, or it's just body. We've become body worshippers. And even the people who want to eat healthy and all that is only because they want to look good, look young. My point is, develop the inner beauty with it that never fades with age. Find that peace of mind. Find that connect with Atman within. You will remain ever young, ever beautiful. Vyasa was considered ugly in terms of physical appearance, but he's described as being such a beautiful personality. So all the effort that goes in the Botoxing and the money that goes towards it, if only a fraction of it was invested in inner purification and internal beauty, you would lead a life that will give you happiness and eternal youth.
I really hope, Jayaji, that this, conversation about working on your own inner self and how do you nurture that. Certain tools you have given in this conversation. Certain tools we can learn from people like you. We can maybe attend certain courses. We can read certain books. We can get into the study of what this inner dimension is.
See, my appeal to everyone is irrespective of religion. This is not a religious thing, is study the Bhagavad Gita, which can take you from mediocrity to excellence, from drudgery to revelry, from imperfection to perfection, and from being an ordinary mortal to becoming an extraordinary immortal. This is the heritage of every Indian. This is our inheritance. How can we ignore it? We are the most unintelligent people in the world, where we ignore our own strengths and go running after what other people have. Culturally, we are so rich. Spiritually, we are so rich. But we're not tapping into it. And it's not just now, for a whole millennium. Our forefathers, few generations back, gave it up. Now we need to get back, study it, live it, become living models of perfection.
I sometimes feel, what if not this could be a probable way for us to find peace in our life.
There is no other.
There is no other way. All the discussions, that I've had with motivational gurus or people who understand science more, people who understand spirituality more, people who understand religion more, all of the people are pointing out to this inner dimensions. I've worked with coaches who are in America, who are in Europe. I've worked with doctors. I've got psychologists on this podcast as well. All of these people are pointing out to this some untapped potential, which is your inner potential. Nobody's talking about external, whatever. External, anyway, our design of life is such that we'll be exploring it. Today we have figured out how a vehicle works. Tomorrow we'll figure out how a plane is built in that, medium to carry us wherever we want to go faster. That is evolving at its natural pace, etc., etc. But this inner development is somehow getting muted, which I hope through this conversation, you have inspired so many people across the world with your sermons, with your discourses, your lectures. I really, really hope that this conversation also is perceived in that manner, because there are a lot of logical questions that we get in the comment box, which earlier used to, trouble me, that why people are not understanding this and all of that. Only in Bhagavad Gita I found my solution that to such people also you have to approach them with compassion. You have to see that they are not at that level of inquiry to understand the subtler aspects of life and things like that. Jayji, to take this conversation towards the closure now, you've talked about this inner brilliance. You've talked about this inner perfection. A question that I ask all of my guests towards the end of the discussion is their definition of success. Now, success is a very worldly concept as well. It can be understood from various lenses. Help me understand success through the lens of Vedanta.
From the Vedantic standpoint, success is only one thing. Whether you have reached the state of self-realization, God-realization, enlightenment, whether you move towards that state, to that extent you're successful. Because everything else is temporary, passing, ephemeral, not worth using as a ballpark of success. So once you get there, everything else follows.
So, if you have to explain exactly this thing to a 15-year-old, how would you say it?
Okay, there are certain markers of spiritual development. Number one, how cheerful are you? Do you wake up in the morning feeling full of beans, happy, for no reason at all? Second, objectivity, maturity. How are you able to view the happenings in the world and say, this is passing, these things happen in life? Like Dhruva, when his stepmother threw him off his father's lap and he went crying to his mother. The mother, in her wisdom, did not even refer to the stepmother. She said, this is the world, son. Sometimes you get what you want, other times you don't get what you want. Joy and sorrow are part and parcel of life. So this understanding, maturity, objectivity, dynamism, you develop this physical and, more importantly, mental dynamism to go through life's challenges with the same energy and vitality. Love, you move away from negative feelings and negativity to feeling positive about everyone. You become a loving person. Like this, there are several. Clarity of thought is very important. You just understand things for what they are. It's like trying to go negotiate your way through a dark room. You'll always hurt yourself. All you need is a candlelight and you see clearly. So that clarity of thought. So to the extent you develop these, to that extent you can congratulate yourself that you have improved a little bit on the spiritual path.
Jayaji, give me a couple of exercises that a 15-year-old can do to monitor all these parameters that you've just said. And why I'm saying 15-year-old again, because I feel maturity-wise, emotional evolution-wise, most of us are 14, 15 only.
So, first of all, to identify your own strength, your talent, it's called Swadharma, your passion in life. Is it medicine? Is it art? Is it music? Is it sport? No? And that gives you clarity. In that field, fix a higher goal. Let's say, like an athlete will say, I want to win the Olympic gold for my country. That is a higher goal. Or I want to play cricket because for my country. And then work towards it, work hard. To have that capacity to work hard is needs to be developed. Then develop gratitude in life. We need to move from the feeling of entitlement to gratitude. We have not been promised anything the day we were born. So how do we have this feeling that I am entitled to something? And a lot of kids have this sense of entitlement.
It's becoming a very prevalent problem. In fact, kids are questioning their parents as if they should be given certain privileges because they are entitled to it by virtue of just being born in that family.
And then have some exposure to the spiritual content. So towards this, we are planning to have residential camps for kids 15 plus. It's interesting that we are planning, and you also said 15 plus, to start weekly courses and also online courses, because it doesn't depend on physical proximity. Many people may not be able to come, but we are moving towards having this course for kids. So, some exposure to the spiritual. Like Manu Bhakar said, my mother taught me the Bhagavad Gita. In earlier times, it was from parent to child, and this needs to be revived. If you do these things, start with this. Life will open up.
Unfortunately, the people from my generation or slightly older than me, they were not raised with this awareness of studying the scriptures, going back to Bhagavad Gita. Maybe your religious practices, today you do this fast, you worship in front of God, you stand in the temple, something like that. Maybe yes, religious practices, but not the actual approach towards Bhagavad Gita or spirituality was given to us. So naturally we are unaware about these. And when we are parents now, most of my friends are parents, people who are slightly older are parents, it is a dire challenge for them to find a way to pass this wisdom because they themselves don't have it. So somewhere I think all of us need to kind of expose ourselves more to these the ancient wisdom.
But the positives are science and technology has given us, the internet has given us avenues to access this knowledge which our forefathers did not have. And so we must use it. The most important thing is you must want it and it'll happen, it'll come. So, as I said earlier, it is our heritage. We are fortunate to be born as Indians where spirituality runs in our veins. All we have to do is awaken it.
Awaken it, tap into your own inner self, try to check with your own emotional, health, well-being. Are you feeling calm? Are you feeling peaceful within? And all of these markers that you've suggested, that can give you an indication of where you are not in harmony with your own self. And probably then a person who is not harmonious within their own selves, naturally they are not harmonious towards everybody and everything that's outside of them. Now, one last question before we say goodbye. Give me one practice or something that I can start right today with to practice the Vedantic way of living life.
Study the Bhagavad Gita.
All right.
Because it opens up everything. It is a course that will, not only that does it open up everything, it addresses people of different types. Like the emotional, devotional will find devotion there. An intellectual will find knowledge. A person who tends to do physical work will find karma yoga. And so you will find what you want in it to grow into an extraordinary person.
So the one big message is that one should start reading Bhagavad Gita and understanding it to kind of create more peace in their life. Thank you so much, Jayaji, for joining me for this conversation. It was such a delight to speak to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching today's episode. I'm talking to you, the one who has stayed in this video till the end. Do leave your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know that you've watched it till the end. Because like I said, your comments, your likes, shares, you spreading it in the groups, you tagging us on social media encourages me to keep this mission going. Because trust me, coming here twice a week, every single week with consistency is not easy. And all we ask for is your love. So do share that. Don't be miser in that. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.